On emissions, all systems go. Everything is under control as we continue to sail forward. Although we see something up in the right of the sky falling from the sun, it is Icarus. Welcome back. Artist Journal, October 2nd, 2024. Scotch tape, scissors, and all. Broadcasting from Berlin, Germany. My name's Adrian Pocobelli. Or as Lee Perry would say, straitjacket and all, welcome back. As it continues, some art, some controversy, a little bit of everything over here. As we continue our journey, amazingly, I think to myself, after taking breaks and then you come back to the 3-day-a-week schedule, it is intense. I have to say, amazingly, I mean, for those that don't know, many of you do, the first 80 shows were every day. But of course, they were a lot shorter. The original idea was to basically do something 10 minutes, 15 minutes, boom, boom, talk about a couple of things, and then go on with your day. It kind of worked beautifully. But you know what the problem was? There was too much significant art, is how I would put it, or art that I found hard to not add to this tapestry of images, so to speak, some moving, some video, some static still. And so here we are. So this is where it's got us. So it's just so hard to leave things out. In a sense, I let this show tell me how long it needs to be, but at a certain point, one wonders. Anyways, let's keep this as short as we can. Look at this brilliant work by Tezos. There is sound. Let me bring the sound in here. And let me just see. I was thinking to myself, you know, it's hard not to see Tezos not having a bright future. And I was thinking to myself, this could be shown, I feel, anywhere in the world. I think you could show this in a subway. I think you could show this at a museum. I think you could show this at the finest contemporary art galleries in the world. And I think people would just kind of marvel at this work. Icarus, you know, connecting it to the tradition amazingly, and the beautiful music that goes with it. And before we move on from it, there are some very interesting aspects of this piece. Look at the sun. Of course, this is Icarus, who flew too close to the sun. I believe it was Daedalus, the dad. Don't fly too close to the sun. Icarus gets the wings from, you know, Tinkerer Dad, flies to the sky. I can do anything. And sure enough, you know, a tale as old as time itself, or at least as old as the human race. Icarus takes it too far because he doesn't have the experience and perishes in the ocean. So Tezos provides really, you know, so much beauty here. Amazingly, this might sound ridiculous to some of you, but it kind of evokes Ovid. Because, of course, this is, I believe, is it the first book or the second book? Maybe it's the second book of Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's very early on. And maybe it's later. Maybe it is later. I'm thinking of Python and the sun and how they tried to stop the sun. That's what I'm thinking of. Kind of a similar story. Maybe this is later. I can't remember. I was thinking of the guy. So the sun, the son of the sun, so to speak, the child of the sun, wanted to take the reins and fly the sun across the sky, like his dad, the sun, does every day, and the sun. The father lets him do it, who carries the chariots forward across the sky. But of course, it's again, giving advice, saying not too much to the left, not too much to the right. And sure enough, the horses go nuts. The sun falls from the sky, and quite a beautiful image. I mean, Ovid, I didn't have a good translation, I'm sure of it, but the imagery is spectacular, even through kind of what I'd call an okay translation. I need to read it. I've read it twice with the same translation. I don't know why I did that. Anyways, let's continue here. But just a few things to notice. This awesome green sun, and it capturing, and with the yellow squares as we see here, flashing in, almost contrasting with the circular sun coming through. The beautiful lawn that is becoming, or what looks like landscape, which are these hills, which you see the pixels growing larger and smaller, and you see Icarus himself. The music brilliantly chosen, made of these gradients here, and the music brilliantly chosen as well, again, evoking that kind of classical mythological wonder. In a sense, we don't see the personal tragedy of Icarus. We see the story, we see Greek mythology, we see the beauty of myth, in a sense, to a certain degree, the mystery, the enigma of myth. And finally, there is the water, boiling down, part of what Zozo is doing on such a simple level. Look at the water, this representation of the water. And last but not least, these kind of white pixels, horizontal pixels that are, shimmering across the entire composition. Magical work by Zozo. Just kind of hypnotizing. Too high, too close to the sun, human, all too human. Icarus, edition of 1 by Zozo, August Ground, picking that up for 80 Tezos. So the prices continue to rise, but $52 for this gorgeous piece of digital art seems like a pretty good deal, doesn't it? So prices continue to rise, not just for Zozo. Like, it's a pretty healthy market. If anything, it's borderline, I don't know if I'd say it's on fire, but it's feeling the heat. It's very hot. The market is hot. Let's put it that way. So nice work from Zozo there as ever. Huge space today with Mumbleboy. That'll be a ton of fun. Has a lot of experience. Has been around as I learned in a couple of, maybe in a reply to a YouTube video I believe Mumbleboy gave maybe a few months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, talking about how Mumbleboy was in New York way back in 2004. Saw, I think, the opening of the Museum of the Moving Image, I believe was the comment. And Little Cakes, who had a gallery in New York. That's one of the things you'll learn on these spaces, that Jerry Saltz and Roberta from the New York Times, whose last name is escaping me, the main critic there, who I think retired, if I'm not mistaken, would visit. Roberta, what is her name? Anyways, so you learn all sorts of interesting things, especially these people in New York. They always have a million kind of amazing stories. So all to say, this is this afternoon, so check that out. Big thank you to Louis for posting this work, image, as it said, and sending it over, I guess, a homage to the show of a certain kind. And there is POC, I imagine Poco. Thanks for sending this over. And I believe it's in the community too. Let's check the comments. Interesting as ever. The show continues to grow. It kind of feels like it doubled. I mean, in terms of the views, like I was getting I'd say between 300 and 500, and now it's feeling like between 500 and maybe 1,000. Maybe that's over, but maybe it's up 50 to 60%. So interesting. I'm not sure if it's because if I'm using the word contemporary art and modern art and people are searching that, if it's an SEO thing. I don't know. So we're going to find out. But there are, welcome all new subscribers. They are coming. Sabato, with a comment on the show. Of course, Sabato talking was included in the big discussion last episode in Joshua's comment there. Sabato Visconti, great show, Poco. I feel like I should respond to Joshua's comment since I'm implicated for saying, quote, that contemporary art should die. Lol. I do some polemics, and polemics is argumentation. Arguing, let's say. I do some polemics being Brazilian and all, but as you've pointed out as well, this isn't about going after artists working in the contemporary art world. It's more about the institutional critique. Maybe I can make this slightly bigger. There we go. I loved Joshua's list of artists and had a great time looking them up and checking out their works. Indeed, I particularly love the artists working with installation, sculpture, and especially textiles. Yeah, I wasn't huge on the installation, but the textiles ones that almost seemed very painterly, I was like all over that. I've been a big fan of Aaron Riley for years. There are a lot of painters in that list, and while their arts are great and very accomplished, I don't think there's anything objectively better than the works of the painters we see on Tezos or Web3. Everyone is very evenly matched here, which brings me to my institutional critique. I mean, yeah. I mean, just to let's look at Zozo. What gave you more pleasure recently? That Zozo, for example, or the last time you were at the Contemporary Art Gallery? Or let's frame it this way. And again, some people have characterized it as bitterness. I'm not bitter. Like, I moved to Berlin. Who was it? I think Greg Nikishima, if I'm not mistaken. It's not bitterness. It's just it's actually passion for art at the end of the day. Like, I moved here for art reasons to Berlin and the whole contemporary art scene. Like, I moved here for a reason, as an artist. So you kind of want to be where the conversation is. So, yeah. But I think it's important, as someone that's passionate about the arts, it's important to, contemporary art has gone in a very abstract direction, right? And it has really challenged the viewer to the point of, I would argue, going over a certain kind of boundary that starts to become, let's say, pretentious. And I don't even mind pretentiousness. You could call it, say, like David Bowie an outsider. That album, or is it Outside? It's called. I think it's Outside, the one he did with Brian Eno in 1997. Kind of a obscure David Bowie. I think you can call certain, like, David Bowie is kind of pretentious, but there is kind of good pretentious. And again, there's a place for pretentiousness. But then sometimes when it just gets let's pretend, and we're all kind of have this mass delusion that somehow this is more meaningful than it is, it's like at a certain point, as passionate people in the arts, we have to observe this and not just keep it to ourselves and go, well, as my friend was saying, as I described last episode, it's just me and all this sort of thing. Anyway, let's go back to Sabato's comment, which brings me to my institutional critique. And that kind of was what it is, isn't it? I mean, or at least looking at the big picture, interesting language, I think well put. The big majority of artists on the list are products of American art schools. Another thing that's been mentioned here, the MFAs, let's read the comment. And art schools in the U.S. are incredibly inaccessible to the majority of people. It's not just a question of the insane costs. There's a deep cultural component as well. Simply put, kids from minority or working class backgrounds are dissuaded from going to art school because artists don't generally make any money. So it's a huge privilege to have the family support to go into art school in your teens or early 20s. Yeah, it's an excellent point. And that's why I think actually, like why I'm the excitement, I would argue, the double whammy that I'd argue of this art on the blockchain, particularly on Tezos because of the low minting fee, but that's kind of expanded over time to become multi-chain. But basically, there's no gatekeeper and there's no cost, really. It's a few cents. You have to learn on your own how to get your crypto over. You could probably even get someone to send you a Tezos if you need to. So it's almost anybody can get set up on Tezos and Object and get your thing going. So you put a free market with no barriers to entry for anyone in the entire world. As long as you have an internet connection and a way to make art, I think you marry that with the free market. To me, that like where people, and what I mean by the free market, just to clarify, I put my work for sale at a price I decide. Collectors decide if they want to buy it. If they don't want to buy it, maybe I change my price, I change my edition number, or, maybe collectors go nuts for it, and then, we're doing fabulously. So that's that kind of market where it's basically you're forced into, I'd argue, an entrepreneurial way of, and there are many people, say, in Argentina, Brazil, who actually, that's why it's so devastating what happened in Brazil. And someone actually put a post, but anyways, let's not get off topic here. That may be reversed, actually, at some point, what's going on in Brazil with X. But some people live on it, like Ed Marola, just to name one example. I believe Santiago, to name another example. Would this be happening in a different, context? Anyways, let's continue with Sabato. More importantly, there's a structural reality that we've been living in a neoliberal model of education, kind of to the earlier point here, where legacy practices are absorbed by academia. And that kind of education is designed to be a luxury product for a small class of people. This is true because the majority of contemporary artists are trained in formal painting, even though paintings have been culturally downstream from various media arts for decades. It is interesting. I mean, I would, maybe I slightly have a different view on it. Like, I would say it's not so much in the fact of painting. I take the point, though. I mean, Sabato's saying, here's this kind of legacy medium, and this is just a product of, a society that is promoting, in these higher echelons that goes, oh, here's this, elite medium, shall we say. And then that's what you do. And it is an elite medium. But I wouldn't write off the medium, and I don't think Sabato is. But I guess let's see what Sabato's saying. But I would argue people have written off painting forever, and I don't think Sabato's writing off painting. But he's basically saying it's been culturally downstream from various media arts for decades. It's interesting. Yeah, so let's continue. Consider the amount of times you see a contemporary art painting go viral, as opposed to digital animation or video game or fan art. Excellent point. The only one I can really think of is the guy who was just in the New York Times that we're looking at, who, it's subscribed on the Twitter profile, so probably already a pretty big account, but who does the oil paintings of like maybe a Big Mac and like, a drink. That's the only one I can really think of. And I think it's because of the content, right? And because of this, contrast of taking, to your point, Sabato, this very traditional medium of oil painting, and the contrast is, hey, let's put a bag of chips. And that creates a natural contrast. In a sense, to your point about it being kind of a legacy medium to a certain degree. I'm just not picking on painting either. It's the same with like classical music composition, jazz music, and poetry. It is interesting. Jazz is an interesting one. It really feels like it's hard to get away from the 1950s and the heyday, the golden age. Poetry, I have to, it's like, does poetry work in the 21st century? It's an open question. I kind of feel like it was subverted by basically rock music, Bob Dylan. In a sense, it went into rock, is where poetry went. I don't know where it is now. Interestingly, classical music composition. Yeah, it's interesting. Many forms of artistic practice have been absorbed by elitist neoliberal systems, and I stand by my polemics in saying that this system should die. And I haven't even touched on the geopolitical aspect of all of this and how artists from the global south are essentially fenced out of the global art market. As I was mentioning with Tezos maybe a little earlier here on this free market and open door, so to speak, to the world. Anyways, much love to you and Joshua. I really enjoy the discussion. Indeed, it is a very interesting discussion. And yeah, I mean, I would say I generally totally agree with this. And yeah, I mean, really, it's, put it this way, I think there's a difference. I mean, Hans Ulrich Obrist, if I'm pronouncing the name right, who I saw actually speak here in Berlin maybe 5 years ago, is pre-COVID, maybe 6 years ago when I first got here. I mean, you see the difference, because there's just this video that Tezos put out. You see the difference in a sense, the mindset, you might say, of Hans Ulrich Obrist, who comes out of the contemporary art scene. I think it's Serpentine there in England, UK, and then what's kind of naturally evolving organically on the blockchain with this kind of, again, this free market. To me, it's like a really stark contrast. It kind of illustrates everything to a certain degree of what's happening, interestingly. Anyway, thank you for the comment. Appreciate that. And both times. Bazaya, thanks for the shout out, amigo. My pleasure. If I ever get anything wrong on a piece, especially calling something maybe being AI when it's not, by all means, send me a message. I will correct on the next episode. We have a few more works by Bazaya this episode. PP Universal, Abrazo Intergalactico Poco Gol. So continue to learn Spanish here on a regular basis. Thanks, PP. Awesome to hear from you. And thank you, everybody, for commenting. By the way, this work, I think it went for 400 Tezos. The auction wasn't over. Another correction there. I thought it was over when I was covering it. Also, here, Musical Web 3, great to hear from you. Sol Siete out of Buenos Aires. Absurd Deity. Fantastic show as always, Adrian. I can't help but be struck by your discussion of the in-real-life modern art bear and your joyful sharing of puppies on giant walls. I think this juxtaposition pretty much reveals a significant element of why the market for much of the recently created modern art within the last few decades is collapsing. Yeah, the disappearance of fun to a certain degree. You know, it's interesting. And I want to come back to Absurd Deity's comment here, and maybe I should just read these comments and then comment. But I was watching a weird, just this YouTube video where it had basically the history of art in 25 minutes, which was a very interesting mind game, so to speak, because it really made you realize, I would argue, how different it is what we're doing here. Like, because it's all like, physical art, so to speak. And I think it stopped at around maybe minimalism, I think in the 1970s, or I think they stopped at contemporary art in the 80s and 90s, this sort of thing. And they stopped there. And when you see the history of art kind of paraded before you, you realize, for me, I was like, wow, what we're doing over here is really different from what's gone on in the entire history of art. But weirdly, I would argue it's acting along similar principles, visual principles, like, contrast, right? Color, composition, like it's working with the same stuff, but it is truly, it kind of made me take a step back and realize this is weirder than I even realized 350 some shows in. Interestingly. Let's continue with Absurd Deity's comment here. So, not surprised the modern art is collapsing. I would estimate that of the last few dozen major museum showings I've attended of still living artists, 90% are steeped in political and social commentary. This is so true. And yeah, my take on this is it's a bit like, my analogy to this is, forgive the hair, and it's going to be a couple of weeks till a haircut here. My analogy to this, or what it reminds me of in my disjointed kind of mind here, is it reminds me of trance music that relies too much on the melody, and it uses the melody as a crutch. I remember this happened in the late 90s when trance became a thing, kind of mainstream trance. And it was like these huge melodies, and they're totally sappy and cheesy. And what they did was, and to me, it was just kind of like going for like the easy win, the reptilian, we like melodies, so we'll put it in, but we're not going to worry about actually the execution of that melody. In a sense, the style, so to speak, of that music. And that's how I see it here. It's a crutch. It's like, I want to say something profound, so I'm going to steep it in politics and social commentary so that you can't not like it. I'm going to talk about issues that you agree with or that maybe you should care about. And if you don't agree with me, how dare you not like my artwork? Like, that's kind of how I see a lot of that work. And I'm not saying it's always coming out of that, but I think that's kind of what it ends up being. Like, I think a lot of people genuinely go and have their political issues and they're trying to, raise that. But to me, it kind of, sometimes if it's at the expense, let's put it this way, if it's at the expense of aesthetics, the medium, the discussion of art that it has with itself, right? Then it's just like, is this a political commentary or is this a art piece? And it's an open question. And if you're really, want to push the politics, then I'd say make the aesthetics unbelievable so that you're forced. And then if people don't agree with the politics, they can go, but it's so nice. Like, maybe I should reconsider. Right. But if the aesthetics aren't that great and then it's political, well, it's like, and then let's say you don't agree with the politics and it's like, well, see, I was right. So let's continue. Don't get me wrong. I 100% believe that art has the power to force a reflection on those aspects of culture and history that we wish to ignore or find too painful to face voluntarily. I agree. Like, there's a time and a place for it, right? For this art of just shining a light on things and going, this is morally outrageous. But interestingly, the surrealists, in a sense, I would say to their credit, they said, regardless of morality, we're just trying to transcribe, what I call transcribing the human nervous system. We're trying to, it's like going back to that tradition of art and writing that is about exploring human nature and trying to understand it, characterize it, which you see from Henry Fielding, especially to, J.G. Ballard. And the reason it becomes persuasive is because, let's say, those literary works are funny. And you recognize, and that becomes an aesthetic, because you see there's a truth that is being identified. Let's continue. I have been deeply moved by many such exhibits in the past that, look at aspects of culture and history that are painful. Nonetheless, I get tired of leaving modern art events feeling a sense of heaviness, distress, or just mentally and emotionally fatigued. I do not think I'm alone here. Absolutely. And this is why it's, in a sense, important to discuss it, because if nobody says anything, then we all, like I'd argue there hasn't been enough discussion, genuine discussion, in the contemporary art scene about it. That's what was so kind of, significant, I would say, about those commentaries we were seeing. It wasn't necessarily even the commentary itself. In a sense, it wasn't like a whole bunch of new thoughts here. But the fact that prominent contemporary art commentators were making the discussion and saying, you know what, maybe this is out of energy or we need to think of another way. They're not even talking about blockchain, one of them mentioned. So interesting. Now, let's continue. How thrilled I was just a few short years ago to visit the LA Broad's Murakami showing. Sure, there's darkness there as well, but what joy to just appreciate the colorful flowers in all their vibrant colors and textures, right? And aesthetics, right? We need more puppies on giant walls. Why? We've all been through the worst pandemic to hit the world in over a century, and our societies are fiercely divided. Our days are already filled with fear and distress. Perhaps we as a society just need a bit of fun in our art. This is a wonderful point. Like, instead of focusing on these kind of political divisions, which at the end of the day, if someone doesn't share the belief of the politics, which is like half the population, in an art show, if the politics are strong, they leave going, let's make sure to defund the arts, is what the right will say, right? So there is something to be said of like not obsessing on the politics, and maybe the big puppy on the wall is more of a, let's put it this way, it's maybe more of a unifying narrative, because who doesn't love a big puppy if it's well done, or who doesn't love Zozo, right? To give a very, example we've just seen. Who doesn't love that? And people are allowed to not like it, and I'm sure some people do, but there is something kind of unifying. It's a really beautiful, profound point that Absurd Deity is making here, which is the unifying power of doing something beautiful and making something interesting and beautiful and provocative. We're seeing that sense of playfulness in the underground movement you are sharing with all of us. Yes, indeed, and I call it the new humor that we see on It's Not Gallery, Machine, right? And we see it also in, I'd even say in the work of Haiti Roquette, right? And others, digital. This is a generational shift. And I'd argue there's an inoculation, kind of like an immune reaction is going on towards what's happened with the contemporary art scene. With this over-serious, as I like to call it, over-sophisticated scene, I think we're getting like an immune reaction from the culture, where now it's kind of like, I'm going to do a painting of doom, That was awesome. I don't know, like if you have the screenshot of Doom, I showed that maybe a few episodes ago at the end of the show, or just the things we're seeing in Machine. Kind of like just a fun, a playfulness, a humor. It's the exact opposite of this very heavy, dark, brooding, which starts to, I would argue, get dangerously close to this romanticism. Capital R romanticism. This over, what does that trance I was describing and contemporary art that, say, relies too heavily on the politics to deliver its sense of being good is melodrama. It relies on melodrama, right? It's too melodramatic. That is, I would argue, the aesthetic criticism of both that trance in the 90s and, art that's overly that relies as a crutch on politics. And again, to Absurd Deity's point, there is a time and a place for politics and shining a light, a moral light, on what's going on. But, it can be overdone. And I think it's also important to consider, say, the surrealists, where they say, hey, we're not even concerned, in a sense, about morality. Our mission is simply to understand human nature and understand ourselves better. So there's room for all of it. But sometimes it feels like, to Absurd Deity's point, there has been I know exactly what you're talking about. Especially here in Berlin. And for that, so we're seeing the sense of playfulness in the underground movement you're sharing with all of us. And for that, I thank you and the artists who are behind this movement. So a big thank you to all the artists who are keeping it real, kind of the new, again, what I call the second generation of digital art. But maybe there's a new generation. Maybe it's not even just digital art, but that humor. It's kind of like from a world of people that grew up with TikTok. Like there's something, it's just, even the airbrush is, you could argue the airbrush is even a little bit ironic. It wasn't your traditional kind of like beautiful paint stroke from a Francis Bacon. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, let's continue. Lena Gordiva, thank you. Love your stream. Awesome to hear. Thank you. Roya Bar, wonderful art. Thank you indeed. I totally agree. Bosque Gracias, awesome Pocobelli. Thank you for your artist journal. My absolute pleasure, Bosque. Great to hear from you. Filippo Francocci, thanks so much, Adrian. Love your show. Beautiful works on black paper. Always interesting. I've worked on black paper. Yes, we were mentioning this already. Very interesting medium, I guess, to work on, black paper. LaRock, the generative arts have become contemporary art. We are the generative artists, Tom LaRock. So interesting. Terry, interesting comment there. Generative art, I like to call it the first generation of digital art in my kind of universe, which is, and we heard it really well with Dr. Bill in the space that we did maybe a month and a half ago, which is the first generation. It's just like, hey, look, we made a line with a machine and we're going to program it so it necessarily brought about this certain kind of art. But with the second generation, you basically start to have softwares where you have a stylus and it's almost like painting. It's kind of like virtual painting, right? And so that becomes an inherently different situation because you're not having to program or code work, and that creates different kinds of work. And I think we can actually kind of loosely distinguish between those two, what I would call generations, so to speak, or iterations of digital art. Very interesting comment. Thank you. Kels, nice one, Adrian. Spike Magazine talks. So fun. Indeed. Did I just talk about Spike again? Yeah, Hans Ulrich Obrist. Yeah. Continuing on. Thank you, Kels. Enigmatrix. I probably went to like 30 of those talks. I lived down the street there by Rosa Luxemburg Platz. Met a lot of people. It was fun. Like, it was kind of a place where you're going to find the intellectuals from the Berlin art scene. Bar 3, which is still there. Bar 3 is just like a stone's throw away there, or like maybe 100 meters, 200 meters away, and which is kind of like the art bar. Kind of still is, but maybe the time has passed a little bit. Anyway, yeah, it kind of was a moment in time. Enigmatrix, really interesting tool you mentioned around the 45-minute mark. We'll definitely be experimenting with it. Yeah. I think you would like that one, Enigmatress. And we have some new work by you in this show. Keep being prolific. It's awesome to see. Zhu Yang, thank you for the quote, for the comment, and Toto Shock. To have minimal taste and understatement of art today, you need to spend dozens of hours studying history of art and scrolling through thousands of paintings, ideally visiting museums. Art as process will be a thing for enthusiasts. Mass will have what they want from AI, in my humble opinion. Very interesting. I wonder, I'm not sure. Because again, I feel like part of what modernism is, I would argue, say, and you really see it, for example, in the History of Art in 25 Minutes. I almost encourage you to look at that show and then think of the scene, what's going on and how different it is, just visually, qualitatively, in the sense of the visual characteristics. But I'd argue, once you started getting paint strokes, let's call it with Turner, was probably an early one, but you could probably even go back to Rembrandt, right? Where all of a sudden the brush strokes started to be celebrated. At that point, I would argue you started to see a revelation, a revealing of the process, which just got further and further, and until this paint stroke by the abstract expressionists. One of the qualities of abstract expressionism, I believe, I haven't read a ton of Clement Greenberg I haven't looked at anything he's written for 20 years at least, but is the flattening of the canvas, right? And where you see this transition from, I'd argue, like, let's call it Rembrandt and Turner, or even in Italian painting, Titian, right? You start getting the paint stroke, right? That conversation kind of culminates, I'd argue, in abstract expressionism, where the volume, the space is completely flattened. It is about the surface of the canvas and entirely about the brushstroke. So I'm not sure, and these paintings are incredibly famous, right? So I guess it depends what we mean by artist process, but I'm not sure. I think the masses, especially now, post-internet, they're pretty hip in a sense. Like, what do you do when you go to a European city? You kind of go to the big gallery. People are getting more educated. So interesting comment, perhaps. But I suspect not, though. But thank you for the comment, an interesting comment as well. Also in the community, Louis JPD. So here it was. It all started simply. I wanted to take Pocobelli Artist Journal screenshot and make it more interesting. It grew from there, layer on layer, texture after texture. And it turned into a portrait of sorts. Not planned, but the good stuff usually isn't. Indeed. Couldn't agree with that more. So here and there, I am talking about Louis' work. Very cool. That was hilarious. And here in Photoshop, playing with different kind of processing and filters and whatnot. Very cool. Thanks, Louis. I'll add it to the growing collection of portraits there, which is totally awesome. Very humbling. Zizo, thank you for the work here. New photography. Photography, I am just waiting to be a thing. I keep telling my friend Bob, get on before, don't be the first, not the last, or be early. People have obviously put photography as Zizo has on the blockchain, but it's not that common. Like, I think there's still a huge opportunity for photographers. Greg Nikshu Mika, collected. So Itzel Reina, I have a music collection. Kind of looks like an AI piece, doesn't it? But I'm not sure. Kind of has a bit of almost like a pixelation to it. Cool music. Nice synth. That looks like an AI synth. That looks like the greatest synth I've ever seen. You only need one synth when you own that one. Anyway, thank you, Greg. Psychofuturist. I want to share today's piece with you here. Strength for the Tarot series I'm doing. I have this later in the show. This is rad. Love the infinity there too. Rad work by Psychofuturist. Thank you for posting. Epic work. And El Oho Ke Mira, Take Away from the Soul. So what is this? Is this a painting? Is this a physical? It looks like, hard to say. Look at how great that looks though. Take Away of the Soul. Very nice piece. Up online. Up out in the world, projected Doctor version, just minted the 41st piece in my series. I actually have another Doctor version as well. So new Doctor version here, very cool. Kind of a slightly different direction, more minimal. Dye repellent. Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Version, for posting. And Austin, awesome to see you and hear from you. Black Panther Claw and cool pixel art. Animated from Austin and Texadelic with a new work. October 1st. And yeah, feel free, try and do it once a week, I would say. I really need to put that in the guidelines there. But anyways, love the background there. Cool contrast with the pixels, these kind of, magic wandy pixels, and kind of more illustrative in the front. Interesting subject matter too. Here's Venta. Look at this. Lost and Found, the start of a new collection presenting original digital paintings alongside AI interpretations. This is another holy grail of AI, which is you just put in something really rough and the AI basically finishes it for you in whatever way or direction you want to go. Super duper interesting. And Psychofuturist, thank you for posting. And I think we've already seen these. Okay, awesome. Did we see Mind Eye? Hey, everyone, sharing a clip called Rise and Slide. I'm not sure if we saw that. So, all to say, thank you, everybody, for posting here. Here it is. Elon Musk's battle with Brazil over content on X may be drawing to a close. So, it sounds like Elon Musk feels like he's made his point, and they're going to agree to hide some of the profiles, interestingly. Ariel, and so we've seen the others. So thank you, Bakke. Cool work here. And thank you also to 369. Have a nice day. Cool animated abstract. Thank you, everyone. Interesting comment from Cal Flemmer. Insane concept for releasing music. Same track at 4 different speeds. I feel like Pocobelli would appreciate this idea. I sure do, especially if they work. I love this idea. Sometimes it does. Interestingly, like I used to DJ and back in the day when you had turntables, the Technics SL1200 turntables, there are tracks, there were a few tracks that I actually preferred playing at 33 RPM, rounds per minute, I think that is, rather than 45. Some like trance, psychedelic trance tracks. I think it was the Infinity Project. They had a track. It was so good, slow. So as long as it works, I'm all over this idea. So very interesting. Let's continue. So we're discussing this idea of, I'll just show you. So why Sigma Toad is with object. We're discussing this issue with almost every single digital marketplace until recently, that it wouldn't, the fiat, here's 50-cent Tezos, and then this, which is worth 37 cents in today's Tezos price. But what would happen is the price would fluctuate over time. And so 3 years ago, maybe Tezos was at $7, and this would be $3.50, and then it's showing it as 3 years ago at 37 cents. So misrepresenting the price, really. And that's just something that has happened across the board in all of blockchain. It's not just Object, it's also OpenSea. Well, anyways, they fixed it. This is epic. Object.com team works so fast. This is so cool. They fixed this in like a couple of days. Now Object.com pieces show their original US dollar value. Like, how interesting is that? Tezos historical US dollar value. Like, I can't wait to like go through my collection and see, or even your own work, like, what does this mean? Right? You're really going to get a sense, because it was all fine and good to get just the crypto. But this is kind of like the real fiat value. Like, it's super interesting. No more devaluation tied to currency, more stable. Super fascinating. So here you go. This is the example. 2 years ago on October 3rd, 2021, on October 3rd, 2021, it was $17.55. And then a time later, it was $16.71. So these are at different times, but they're both 2 Tezos, right? Wow. That's going to be interesting. Super Rare Bot, When Heat Lamps Die, artwork by Die With The Most Likes, Toad Sweeback. This sold for $41,000. So we saw, was it Vincent Van Dough, just kind of buying everything in sight from Die With The Most Likes? They kind of went on a rampage. And for like a long time, what feels like a month, like I don't even know who bought this. I don't think, but it's had its effect. We're seeing Die With The Most Likes. I mean, $41,000. This is kind of like happening all the time. Like, I don't know, maybe not this high, but Die with the Most Likes is making huge sales all the time. So, one of the hardest working people in this entire blockchain art scene, artists anywhere. Luciana Guerra, who of course I follow. When people in traditional art say digital painting is not painting, you would ask if David Hockney is a painter or not. His collection of digital paintings is remarkable. I think there's a Guardian article that you can probably dig up where he calls it a wonderful new medium, talking about his iPad or iPhone paintings. Please stop dividing physical and digital painting. If you use a brush, a canvas, and colors, you're painting. Indeed, and maybe that's a legacy from the first generation where digital was quite a different construction. But now, it's like almost like virtual painting is what we're doing here. You're even getting texture. So to speak. So very interesting. And of course, one of the great pioneers of digital art on the phone and tablet, David Hockney, very early there. Tornado Rodriguez, Paint is My Passion. So nice tune. Kind of like an 8-bit tune. So this, there we go. So I don't know if that's copyright. I assume not. Really cool. What a great basically promo. This is like how you advertise as an artist without advertising. You do the work in progress, and that is your 30-second, 23-second clip. You could even do this, and if you want to get followers, because people just inherently love to watch this, including myself. It's a good way to get followers on social media and everything. It's the greatest advertising you can do is really show the work in progress. Paint is my passion. Almost to Luciana's point, referring to Microsoft or Object Paint, I guess in this case. This is painting. I call them digital paintings, Tornado Rodriguez, good night and thanks for all the love. And working physically as well. Look at this beautiful work here by Tornado Rodriguez. Looking like it's been done with a phone. So nice work here. Walk, another fantastic artist here on the blockchain, doing his thing I believe this is on Amazon by Walk. I think this is on eBay, as I was saying, and it's almost part of the kind of internet manifesto, so to speak, of Walk. I imagine, I don't know, and who knows what happens in life and whatever, but I could see Walk doing this 20 years from now. And then all of a sudden they're commanding like $1 million or $100,000 or $20,000, and probably doing the same thing, starting at €1 and seeing what happens. Just an awesome artist, and developing a following, I believe, on eBay. I mean, dare I risk opening this up here? It's already at $46.50. I mean, think about that. Accetta tutto. So 94 people have seen this in the last 24 hours, 12 offers already. Isn't that interesting? So look at that. Very interesting. Kind of a little burgeoning art scene here on eBay. Fascinating. Mariana J.U. Looks like one of Mariana's pieces, doesn't it? The flowers, if you've seen her work, on a phone. How cool is that? Very cool. And here's Evelyn. Remember these experimental abstracts? We showed a few of them here. They're now being printed. So very nice looking works here. 68 by 48 centimeters with frame. Very cool work from Evelyn O. Looking good as we move into the paintings here. Sax Cat, that is Martin Bruce. Look at this. So I think we saw the physical of this when Martin Bruce was experimenting or starting to use spray, right? Spray paint or graphic design, airbrush is what I'm trying to say. Now this has been turned into a digital. Interestingly, completely different work here in a large way, still recognizable. And just an interesting GIF here. Super interesting experimentation going on here. This is an edition of 1 and not listed yet, interestingly. Here's Yuri J with the second account, which has 4 extra J's, as you can see there. If you're looking for these works, or if you're a fan and you want to follow the other account, Underpants are a portrait of the artist as a pure smell. So epic title there from Yuri J, but epic still life from Yuri J. Really nice piece here. And there's other clothing here. There's sock number 1. Again, effects on effects and using outlines to separate them, but not entirely. Like we see this pattern here that is moving around. Looks like it's been doubled. It's also here, but it's being treated differently. And then probably a different kind of, it looks like screen or lighten, what do they call it? Layer style. Super interesting. Going to Coach Pete for 300 Tezos. The market's pretty hot, isn't it? Actually, let's check what this other work went for. 333 Tezos. We were seeing RJ make a few sales at 300. These are not bad prices. And this is the thing. These prices are not totally new, but it's the speed with which they're selling, suggesting people are trying to get them before someone else does. So demand, I would argue, is increasing here. Stock number 42, using the mosaic filter here, again, addition of 1, and we see more just beautiful texture here, more doubling of the layers and everything. Very cool. It's really going somewhere, isn't it? 300 Tezos, boom. Sold within the first hour, like listed and sold. This is pretty good. Pants, edition of 11, and this sold out at 13 Tezos. Really smart selling here. So how much is that? 340 Tezos. Hot market here, doing more clothing. Edition of 11. Very smart, because maybe this one might have been slower to move just because of the composition. Okay, let's turn this into an edition of 11. And then it's only 13 Tezos. Awesome. Oh, sorry, 130 Tezos is what this went for. Or 143. Doing the math on the fly here. Yuri also posted this interesting work here. Kind of looks like a figure, maybe 2 samurais fighting, not sure. Interesting piece on X. And here is Ed Marola, Dream of Meat. Now, this almost looks like it was started. We're back to Martin Bruce here and to other works by Ed Marola. Doesn't this look like it was started as a physical and then taken a picture of and then kind of worked over? Pretty interesting. And what is this called? Dream of Meat. And so we see this kind of monster figure, insect monster, goat, and someone being eaten, seemingly, and these cute little bones there. Interesting piece here from Ed Marola, edition of 5 for 55 Tezos each. And here is another one, edition of 21 for, and that was listed for 12 Tezos. And here, just a nice small work here by Ed Marola. So interesting texture as ever, almost looking like physical with the reflection, almost looking like it is reflecting off the texture in the shirt there. Interesting piece. We agree, one word, edition of 21 for 12 Tezos from Ed Marola. And continuing on, go support Ed, because still silenced over there in Brazil, Gozo. With this gorgeous work, this got a lot of attention on the timeline, deservedly. A head-turning work, really. We've seen a lot of Gozo's work, and here we see just beautiful pixelation. And again, I believe using also a little bit of Stable Diffusion AI for the textures, which we're seeing with Scamra. Perhaps RJ. We're going to see some RJs in a second, so you can make your own judgment there. And so interesting work here. Old Telephone, Diversion, edition of 20, and selling out at 15 Tezos. Great color. Fantastic color. Here's a new one by Enigmatras. No title here. This is another head-turning work. And you see what looks like math letters here. And then you see what looks like maybe a coffee or a vase, or maybe a vase or a water jug, maybe. A book and an orange, and perhaps another book here. Interesting piece. And then you have these triangles. Tons of experimentation here, doing quite well. Over 4,000 views there. Here's RJ. And again, you see these textures. This is on X. And again, you see what look like maybe Stable Diffusion textures. Not sure. and really cool kind of figurative work. Kind of bleeding through here, working really nicely with layers. Again, great textures. And gotta love this huge vacant area at the bottom. Another really nice piece by RJ AI and Pixel Painting. So this is 333 Tezos still available. And here you see a little, so able to produce a ton of work here. And you're seeing these great kind of masking and everything, great textures, pixelation and everything. 838 by 1,000 pixels, nice size. Then we got these 3 heads, again, in the same style here. Very cool. Definitely have worked in a similar way with the different kind of screen outputs, different kinds of pixelation, as you'll see here. And just very nice textures, as you see. So there's a second head, and here's the third head. AI Pixels and Collage GIF, and very nice. Love this kind of border here. Great negative space, and great outline. A lot of great things going on there. Nice color. Edition of 1, and not listed yet. And here's deer, and also doing some animals. So putting out a whole bunch of work here. And here, working with some animals, a couple of deers in this style as well. Continuing on, Rosaceo, Gone and 3 Chairs, after Joseph Kosus, 1 and 3 Chairs. This is quite a different work for Rosaceo. Very nice, by the way. It's very cool, and we see a lot of the kind of classic elements, maybe some skeletons, chair, maybe the fire and the eyes, but kind of simplified to a certain degree. Even the windows. Much simpler composition, not too many colors, right? But very effective. And this is referring to probably Joseph Kosuth. I've seen this work or a similar work, I think by this artist, where they have the image of the work and then you have the dictionary definition. Classic contemporary art. At least there it's like, you don't need to really read too much other than the definition to figure out what's going on. Nice piece from Rosaceo, edition of 10 for 10 Tezos, and almost all gone. Here is Rat Cloak. Press F to pay respect. Interesting title. Not exactly sure what that means. Might be sold out. So kind of a bit of an army theme here. An officer perhaps with maybe an interesting bleeding out of the face into the background here. Very wild, kind of irrational move here. And then here is the hand saluting. Interesting piece from Rat Cloak, always beautifully painted. Nice outline here, and great kind of very painterly textures. Again, you're not going to do this with computer code, right? And then beautifully drawn here. Really making nice work of those digital brushes using Photoshop. Edition of 10, I believe this is sold out at 20 Tezos. Here's Miss Sun. Speaking of a hot market, so Miss Sun, this is the Myth, releasing Miss Sun, resurrecting this series here. And here we have the Myth, I assume, with a wrestling mask, and this had a whole bidding war between Scomra and Robness V2, and then finally Bugged Matrix swooped in at the end to pay 800 Tezos, massive sale for the Myth on this portrait. Very cool. A one-of-one series by Daniel Myth made with Microsoft Paint and other tools. So there is the auction. Interestingly, you know what I'm looking at? It's hard to tell because these are different prices, but if you bid 125 Tezos here, and then if you got another bid, let's say, just for the sake of argument, like 5 minutes later, would you have a different Tezos price? Like, how often is it updating? Interestingly. Anyway, very cool. Congrats to Myth and to the owner. Bazaya, the Shady Swinger. Here is Bazaya, and so I'm pretty sure this is just a straight-up painting, often uses the phone, I believe. Slim shaders, really cool as part of this series that we're seeing. Nice square work, edition of 10, and this is sold out once again at only 5 Tezos, very reasonable price. Here's another one, Easy Curveball. In Compton, even the curveballs come with flow, edition of 10, also sold out at 5 Tezos. And here, another great, there's Easy E, straight out of Compton, with a baseball. So cool kind of mix of baseball and music, and trading cards. L'Inquisiteur, The Wild Wild World. So kind of an edgy work. One of L'Inquisiteur's, I think it's L'Inquisiteur who does, look for the Kermit the Frog work. It's one of the most hilarious works actually on the entire Tezos blockchain. I've shown it a couple of times here, so maybe I won't show it again, or at least not now. Here's a bear and everything. So kind of always kind of humor in the work. Of course, that's also the one that where you see the Pocobelli and drag there. I decided to make it my, someone mentioned, I think it was Trippy Collector, you should make that your profile picture. And I was actually like, that's a pretty good idea. It's kind of fun. We'll keep it up there for a bit. Anyway, cool work from L'Inquisiteur. And that is $3.99, and that is 4 have been sold, edition of 10. Here's Joe Uncalba from September 29th, may lead. So cool work found on the timeline with kind of this portrait of this person with flowers. Kind of has a surreal kind of feel to it with bees coming in. A digital illustration, and that is an edition of 5 for 5 Tezos, and none sold so far. Don't Buy on the other side. So more previews, I think, of this show that's coming up with Don't Buy. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. I'm not sure if the audio goes with it, but I'll just show you the visual here. So cool work there. Check out Don't Buy. There's a big show coming up, I think this week. Seba Sestero. Cool kind of psychological imagery. Kind of reminds me of Crete a little bit here. Nice illustration. And again, the sky here turning into the floor for the image above. Kind of interesting work. Stunning work by Nov 1914. Mujer con abrigo purpura after Henri Matisse. So another stunner from Nov 1914. And introducing some of these irrational elements that I was noticing were not in. These little stripes that are classic Nov 1914. What a work. Just fantastic. And the color is spectacular. This is now 32 Tezos on secondary, selling out for 14 Tezos on primary. There's Absurd Deity. Absurd Deity is buying like a maniac in a good way. Mine too. Symbiosis, drawing by Santiago Ruao. It's great to see the enthusiasm for this scene. Beautiful work by Santiago Ruao. This is on Zora. Nice abstract, cool colors. And playing with these themes. We've seen these little shapes before, always keeping it new. And 16 minted so far on Zora. And continuing on, Mumble Boy, Envision Creation to Sound of Waves. So this is who we're going to have on today's space. And so putting together these digital and physical collages. We're going to ask Mumble Boy all about this on today's space. If you can't make it, it will be recorded and it'll be on the timeline. Super interesting artist. Again, has been around for a bit. Huge file, 6400 by 6900. And this must be Santiago because it's taken a minute to load. Rhythm of the Night Goes Well, AI Collage. And here we have an edition of 25 for 7 Tezos. This is by Santiago, combining, works, these kind of illustrations we see here and everything. Wild. I wonder if this is raw AI collage. I think it's just, I think Santiago is still putting it together, so to speak. Hard to say though. Interesting, great abstract, ton going on in these epic works. Here is Kiro, DJ Kiro Carrots, auction starting at 0.001, so very cheap. And here another video painting by Kiro, 0.01 ETH. That is on Foundation and on the base. Here's Tradscape, October 1st, Niagara. A familiar image for anybody that's grown up in Canada. Of course, Tradscape makes the music that starts this show as well as ends this show. So always awesome to see Tradscape on the scene. Gorgeous pixel art rendition of Niagara Falls. I guess it's after Louisa Davis Minot, Niagara Falls 1818, oil on canvas, adapted. Very cool, selling and available for 100 Tezos on Object. Kurt Hustle Collective, Control Guide. So this is pretty interesting. Get the music going here. Always almost a Detroit feel to the music here. Really good musicians. And amazing glitch. Just awesome. It's hard to stop. I mean, amazing. That should be an album, on an album. It's very hard to stop. Edition of 10 Tezos, fantastic. And I believe, there's Uxine, Haiti Rocket, House of the Model, Nicholas Dietrich, Ex-Mortal, Having Fun, Mikey Wilson, All-Star Cast, Collects, Kurt Hustle Collective. I might have to join that party. Dan Kelly, who of course I follow, Draw Dog Tuesday. So playing again with this kind of experimental pixel art, often rendered through a screen or recording a screen, which is kind of how you maybe get that texture there. Interesting. By Dan Kelly, as usual. Wasteman Goldminovich, Get Mashed. And it looks like took a painting and maybe even put it into that software or some kind of pixelation software. Interesting effect, isn't it? That is called Get Mashed, edition of 8, and that is sold out for 99 cents each, so very reasonable price. Here's Hermipe pixel art. I believe out of Japan, if I'm not mistaken. Really interesting pixel artist. I believe makes it on their phone. And not sure what software they would use for that. But really pretty cool work. Maybe they go to a website. Because this is it's pretty different pixel art. Let's see what the title is. Painting is Hanging. Blue Heron Wandering Warrior. And does a lot of physical work, some corporate work. Did something for Starbucks. Super interesting artist. Tornado Rodriguez. It makes no sense. So here is the work that we were seeing the preview for. I mean, amazing. Using Object 98. Epic work here. And we have this big, what looks like a rat coming out and a small person on a couch. Beautifully drawn here. 2 colors. Edition of 1. And that's sold for 61 Tezos to Kells at auction. Sabato starting the auction. Nice work. Here's Kuro by E-Boy. So E-Boy, of course, is one of the pioneers. It's a duo out of Germany. Pioneers of pixel art. Told me that I found out about through Kuro. And here is a portrait of Kuro by E-Boy. So pretty rad. So Kuro's roots stretch deep, it seems to me. And this is 93 by 93 multiplied by 20, interestingly. Here's Murakit. I've been waiting for Murakit to come back here on the scene, preparing something very special. Where should I mint? Interesting question. You'll notice it's almost all object these days, interestingly. Very interestingly. Maybe that's why the market's getting hot, because maybe the market is to a certain degree just speculating out loud. Maybe the market's moving a little bit. Like the entire market is just a little bit more oriented, shall we say, towards object. Interesting. Anyways, can't wait to see what Murakit does. That is a work in progress. Here's Brain Dead doing Windows Still Life. So a homage to John, OG artist who does these windows on Tezos blockchain. Very nice homage. That is an edition of 13 and sold out at 13 Tezos. And here is Noodler, Memory Experiment. So playing with just a couple, maybe 3 colors here, and this building kind of moving, different parts of the building moving in different directions, kind of creating an optical illusion, memory experiment, very cool, from Noodler. This is EMI Pixel, number 34, with a cool kind of minimal abstract work in pixel art. Very cool, made with Aseprite, 100 by 100. And here is Byte by Bit Superponk 82. And I don't know if this is listed yet, burned, but maybe a different version is up, that classic green and black. Press start. I believe these are simulated video games. In other words, video games that never existed. Superponk 82, made with PC Paint 3.1 from 1988. Here's just a work in progress from Stippen Pixel, who seems to be slowly but surely coming back on the scene, which is exciting. Really, really awesome pixel artist. Here is Kyle Flemmer, edition of 1. So you can tell this is on chain. This is classic on chain, and you can't make it. I actually have a bigger version in a second, but you know what's interesting is someone who's put a few works on Bitcoin is you really start to love this small size. Even like to me, even just seeing like the little tiling here and the little pixels, it's like a Google ad, right? It's like a 240 by 240. What's a Google ad? 300, right? By 280 maybe, 300 by 280. So super cool. Maybe even less, 260. Just love it. And here's the big version. Because of course, with pixel art, you can just magnify infinitely. And we saw the 1-to-1 scale, 100% on-chain pixel art. So I believe that's on Tezos. Also on-chain is Retromanny. And this one I don't have a big version of. It was just minted before I started the show. So this is the version I have. So Raktroid. So putting this video game on-chain that Retromanny is doing, again, kind of delightfully small here. Level 1, GIF stored on-chain as base 64 coded string, 160 by 160. Edition of 1 for 14 kilobytes. Font, Mech Sans, hilarious. 50 Tezos at auction. Here's Pamelo Chirone, just saying goodnight, just posting a work here. Beautiful work. Great to see Pamelo Chirone on the scene. Of course, I follow Pamelo. Out of Buenos Aires, I believe. Mason III, Nucleoid Carpet. So Mason III doing a little bit of abstract pixel art, interestingly. Edition of 1, this is 30 Tezos. And here is Silvasan 2's Explosion. And here we see that famous blimp that exploded. Can't remember the name, doesn't say here. But anyway, a cool rendition here. Nintendo Glitch ROM by Silvasan 2's. Usually making pretty huge files. Like they're pretty long. It's 2,000 frames. Like that's a whole movie. 200 megabytes. So interesting. You see the little, my cursor is showing that it's taxing on the computer. Edition 3 minted open edition. Here is Kiro again, Far From Home, doing a glitch ROM. And yeah, so this I believe is straight out of, I think it's Sega, and here you see it. So very kind of lo-fi, cool glitch ROM, kind of raw glitch ROM, we might call it. Far From Home and at auction for 0.0025. Here's Elna Frederick, and someone was mentioning, maybe it was Sabato, Soulseek, and I think it is Soulseek, the old Soulseek logo, which was one of the original file sharing softwares from the 2000s. So hilarious work there from Elna Frederick. Here's MCHX with a cool kind of animated, I guess, minimal abstract work here. Let's see. And I think it is plain. So it is, as you see here. So just slightly shifting. Very minimal from MCHX. Very, very cool. Freshly inscribed by Mech. So maybe on Bitcoin. I wonder. Freshly inscribed when you say, here it is on ordinals. Very cool. Dare I open this? Okay, so this is just to the work itself. Very cool. From MCHX. Mario Carrillo Inward. So here, just cool animated abstract. As these forms kind of bleed into each other. And here's Psychofuturist, Strength, Animal Passions, and Earthly Cravings, lifting a lion, the king of the animals here, and here a kind of anatomical figure lifting up the lion. Cool animation, kind of edgy digital artwork here. Edition of 12, and selling out at 6 Tezos. Nice work. Etzo, Chapelle Notre-Dame de Lourdes, a bit over 2 days left on this open edition. So this is probably a church that has been glitched out. A photo from a Let's Glitch It glitch camera, further processed with analog glitch hardware. Interesting. So effects on effects, and that is on Object, 7 Tez open edition. Here's Ex Mortal Formations, another nice work here, edition of 13. Analog video glitch, great color. We've got a couple of works by Renki coming up here. And here you see the animation. Often one of ones probably available on Object, but you have to put in an offer. And Fukuoka which almost looks like a hurricane, but hard to say. Another animated abstract by Renke. Awesome to see them continue. One of the most consistent and prolific artists on the blockchain. Dr. Version, Landscape 23, where you see this very cool kind of cycling color through these objects here. Very nice piece from Dr. Version. This came out last week and sold for 8 Tezos. And I think it's an edition, so it's an edition of 3. Continuing on, here's Walk Again, The Three Ages. And can't remember who the artist is on this. I want to say Caravaggio, but just based on the color, but not sure. But I feel like I've actually recently come across this work. Anyway, cool work by digital artwork by Walk, now 7 Tezos. Again, employing the same sales strategy. I think puts it at 1 Tezos or €1 on eBay. Here's Scamra. Not sure if this is new or not. Sentimental.eth. New profile pic. What does it mean to dream of black rainbows? This might be an older work by Scamra. This was a rad series. These computers and people at computers. Here is someone Scamra was collecting. Toucan, sold thanks to Scamra. I'm pretty sure I already follow Toucan. So cool textured AI artwork. Here's another one by Toucan. Sold thanks Scamra. I do follow Toucan. So cool work there. And AI artwork. And I don't think we've seen this one. So playing again with several different styles and frames and inserting video into one of them and then dithering it. Edition of 1 sold for 44 Tezos. Nice sale. And here's Martin Joe with another GM bear, this one with a yellow fur, interestingly. GM Little Bears, of course I follow Martin. Got coffee. And Santiago with an AI artwork, almost looks like a person. So continuing. Oops. So continuing with the AI, kind of almost looking like Japanese illustration. Speaking of which, here's Moto Mohiro with these surreal illustrations that are so carefully done with such care. These squirrels moving in and out of the skull on a little ramp. Just awesome. Wonder how many likes. 972 likes. That's pretty good. So this person kind of doing really well on Instagram. Eric Foss, It's Not Gallery. This was a cool piece. I think we have a few works by It's Not Gallery. Fun piece to Absurd Deities point. Here's Bobichik Mattia. We've looked at a ton of their work. Brand new one. They're starting to get kind of more and more, I want to say, abstract. Very cool looking paintings, though. Just love them. Here's Stefan Schwarzer, Escapar screen print, polychromos on paper. So that sounds like colored pencil and screen print. Nice combination, super interesting artist. Stefan Schwarzer out of Germany. Here, also out of Germany, but now in New York, Charlie Stein, friend of mine. I have only arrived 2 months ago at my studio in New York, but surprisingly enough, I managed to get a lot of work done despite this beautiful city's distractive nature. I still have 10 more months ahead of me within the program, but I will be back in Berlin in November. So here are some of the highlights of this really edgy work that Charlie has been doing. So cool work here too. Busy in New York City. And where is Charlie? There's Charlie over there. Having fun in New York, doing well. Here is Donnie O'Donnell. We've looked at a ton of their work. A beautiful dog. Here, Bonnie from Chorlton, Manchester. So I think doing portraits. People, of course, want portraits of their pets. This is a whole business here. Brilliant. And we saw that huge room the other day with the walls done in this style. Really interesting artists. Bondozo Bandito, Rauschenberg erasing de Kooning. So hilarious. So here is a depiction of Rauschenberg about to erase a de Kooning with this awesome yellow for the outline there. Such a great creative artist. There's actually a mini documentary you can find on Instagram. Where is it? I think it's probably down a few. It's about 10 minutes. It's really great. Here's more work by Bondozo Bandito. Just constantly making work. Again, quite light in their approach. Very cool. Another one. The artist is Solitaire, not available. So this is sold. I guess the artist is present is maybe the reference. Not sure. Just really nice piece. Very fun work. And just beautifully, when you work so fast and you do so much, you make all these little moves, which is just which makes the work even more interesting. And maybe it was just painted over another painting, perhaps. Not sure. Here's Walk again with the sinking ship. Not exactly sure the reference, but look, is this right on the wall? Hard to say. I kind of doubt it's right on the wall, but it's tempting to think. Not exactly sure how this is done, but epic work here from Walk. And that's your show. And so in a short hour and a half, we'll do a space with Mumbleboy. Check it out. If you don't hear it live, you can always check out the feed. Thank you for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the show. Until next time, take care.